What's up everybody, my name is Light and welcome to my creative world. Right now we're in my old world, which has some of my previous creations like the Hobbit village of Ashira and the desert city of Rainier. For this episode we're adding a new build to this world, so let's jump right in and let's build a castle. First I started terraforming the land. I smoothed out a flatter area for our castle to stand over, and then using different colored blocks of wool, I began drafting out a plan for the build. But I knew that I wanted to have two main castle halls for this build, with one of them being built diagonally and intersecting into the other hall. For the most part, the blue and white is meant to represent the main castle halls, exterior walls, and walkways, while the yellow wool is meant to represent the many towers that will rise up above the castle grounds. And as for the red wool, that will act as a pathway to the main entrance of the castle. I also wanted to add some kind of exterior balcony hanging off of the diagonal main hall, which you can see me figuring out with the blue wool. I continued to reiterate this plan until I was happy with how all of it fit together, which took quite a bit of time, but once I was done, I was definitely very happy with the design. So the first thing that I began detailing was the foundation for the build. From the bottom up, I used moss blocks, lichen blocks, mossy cobblestone, andesite, and stone. This gradual change between the blocks helps to make the castle look like it's been here for a really long time, and that nature is slowly growing back to reclaim these bits of the foundation. I'm really happy with how this gradient came out, and it really nailed that look that I was thinking of. That red wool spanning across the river will become the main entrance, facing towards the village of Ashira. For now though, we're working on the side entrance. So with the foundation done, I headed over to the second entrance that we're going to have for the castle grounds. I carved out an entryway large enough for horses and carriages to pass through, and then I began designing the first pair of towers. I wanted these first two towers to be rather small so that they don't cover up the actual facade of the castle. I also built them up using another gradient, one that we would use for all of the castle walls. I made this gradient out of sandstone, suspicious sand blocks, normal sand, and smooth sandstone. This pattern makes the castle walls look smoother and brighter the higher up you look, with the stone looking more rocky and disheveled at the bottom, and brighter and smoother at the top. I don't really know how much sense that makes structurally, but we're more concerned with the aesthetics for this build, and I'm happy with how it looks. And with that first tower in place, I copy and pasted it to the other side of the entrance. I also replaced some of the detailing from those tough bricks to a much more appealing dark oak wood for detail. After filling out the castle walls with some spruce walkways on top, I began designing the first diagonal tower of this build. This was pretty simple, as it's also a rather small tower. I used the same color palette and gradient with stained glass and dark oak wood for detail. The stained glass I used was purple, magenta, and pink, and I'll actually play around and change these stained glass windows a bit later in the build. This time I capped off the tower with a steeply sloped deep slate roof, also with a gradient from tiled deep slate to deep slate bricks, and finally cobbled deep slate at the top. And with that tower done, I moved on to the next part of the build, which is the first large tower of the castle. Because this is a large tower, I really wanted to make sure the detailing on this one looked good, and I do really love how it came out. I think the window and pillar designs that I incorporated into this tower really add a lot of verticality to it, and the dark oak blocks and sandstone walls really add a nice feeling of depth to the build. I'll actually return near the end of the video to this tower to add a roof, but for the time being I did like it with an open floor top. And once I had finished building that large tower, I entered the castle walls to swap out the ground with some moss blocks and pathways to make it look more natural. For the path, I used tough blocks, as well as some gravel and mossy cobblestone to blend the road into the surrounding ground. And then it was time to raise up the towers and the walls of the first castle hall. Once I had figured out the height that I wanted these walls and towers to be, I built in the floor with some spruce wood and went ahead and added these rows of windows spanning across the top of the wall on both sides of the castle hall. I made these windows appear as if they have columns separating them using sandstone walls and a mixture of smooth sandstone stairs and slabs, and I really love how they came out. And returning to the courtyard that I now had, I again mapped out the height of the entrance, and I also planned out its roof. And then I began detailing it out with sandstone blocks, walls, stairs, and slabs, and I used dark oak gates and fences as well to add a bit more depth to the facade. I also added some more stained glass windows encircling above and around the entryway, and of course, I added a nice little fancy entrance using some dark oak doors and trapdoors. I really love how this side entrance turned out, and I think it looks really nice. So after that, I wanted to work on the main entrance. I replaced the red wool from before with a stone bridge crossing this river and leading into the castle hall. I reused the same gradient that I'd used for the foundation to keep up with that theme of nature reclaiming the castle, and I also added the same pathway using tough blocks from before for the bridge. And with that in place, I detailed out the entrance itself using some dark oak wood spanning below the row of windows that I'd added earlier. I also built in some stained glass windows and of course, another dark oak doorway. And now zooming out, I added some grass and ferns growing on top of the moss blocks on this bridge before building up these towers on either side of the main entrance. I made these towers small as well so that they don't cover up this grand entrance. And with all of that done, I returned to the side courtyard to add some grass and ferns there as well and fix up the entrance a bit. And then it was time to finish off the detailing for this first castle hall. I began to plan out the roof, but I stopped so that I could decorate this sort of cylindrical tower that's built into the wall with sandstone walls, dark oak gates, fences, and some stained glass windows before capping it off with a roof. And after that, I expanded the roof over the entire castle hall, and I got to work adding the same deep slate gradient for the roof that I designed earlier. I worked on adding some final touches to the roof with a design using tough bricks and dark oak gates spanning across the peak. And as we fly over the build, you'll also notice that I went ahead and I added some more windows to the opposite side of the castle hall here as well. And as we rotate around the castle, I finished up detailing the facade facing the courtyard with more stained glass windows and some pretty tricky to make but really fancy looking details that add a lot more depth to the build. I spent a lot of time making sure that this facade looked exactly how I wanted it to, and it did take a good amount of time, but I really do love how it came out. And finally, it was time to raise up the walls of the diagonal castle hall as well. I did this pretty quickly, and then I mapped out where the roof would lay on top of it. I was really excited to work on the balcony that I had planned to build here before, so I went ahead and I filled in the floor using some spruce wood blocks, and I extended the balcony as well to meet up with that tower over on the side. And then I built up this sort of open arched wall surrounding the balcony with columns using sandstone walls. I added a roof on top of it, this one being much less steep than all of the other roofs. After I had done that, I extended the castle hall to meet up a bit further on top of the balcony. And then I added a second balcony around the first by constructing a new foundation. This foundation differs a little bit as I added some archways to make it clear that this was an expansion of the balcony. And it also comes together to create a nice repeated architectural language between the enclosed balcony and the foundation below it. I also raised up the height of the walls enclosing this balcony so that it better fit with the style of the castle. And I also fixed up the roof so that I had more space to make a grander entrance between both balconies. Since that first one had a roof and felt more like an enclosed courtyard now, I wanted this second balcony to remain more open. So I didn't add a roof on top of it. Instead, I finished up detailing with a dark oak railing using trapdoors and gates before returning to finish up the castle hall itself. I ended up spending a lot of time here really fleshing out the walls. Since this part of the build is diagonal, it did take a lot more time to make it look nice, and I actually mistakenly didn't record all of the work that I'd done here. Anyways, I began by editing some circular glass windows, one positioned closer towards the top and another one in the middle. And then on both sides I added two vertical stained glass windows, before coming back to finish up the roof. And again, I added in the roof with a deep slate gradient and the same rows of tough bricks from before, rising up to contrast that deep slate color of the roof. Because it's diagonal, it was difficult to make this part of the build fit cohesively with the other parts, but I feel like eventually I did manage to do this because I went around the entire castle grounds and I added in some more tough bricks and fixed up the roofs elsewhere where I hadn't entirely finished them before. You can see me doing that on the diagonal tower as well as that kind of cylindrical building jutting out of the first castle hall. I spent some more time detailing out the walls of this castle hall by adding some more stained glass windows and fixing the depth of the build with some sandstone walls. Of course, I did the exact same thing on the other side of the build, and I played around with how I would border each of these windows, eventually landing on this design that I thought was pretty cool using a mixture of dark oak blocks, fences, and gates. And as we snap back to this next shot, you can see the parts of the castle hall that I finished up and didn't record, and I do apologize for losing that footage, but thankfully that's all I lost, and you can still see the end product here. And at this point I was loving how the castle was looking, but we're not done yet. I went ahead and I started designing this tower that rises up at this corner between both of the castle halls. This is the first tower that actually meets up with the main part of the castle, so I really wanted to make sure that it held up consistently with the architectural language that I've been using so far. To do this, I extended that dark oak wrapping from the first hall to cross over to the tower, and then of course, I made some more stained glass windows rising up the tower, detailing it more with some dark oak fences, stairs, slabs, and trapdoors. Using some more sandstone walls, I played around with the depth of the build, and then I capped it all off with another deep slate roof. This was also the point where I came back to the diagonally built castle hall, and I played around with the colors of the stained glass windows. I had initially only been using purple, magenta, and pink, but I swapped in some dark and light blue as well as some cyan stained glass. and I really love the kind of foggier, misty look that these give to the windows. I don't make this change with all of the windows of the entire castle, but I did do it with many of them, especially the larger windows, so that from afar when you're looking up at this build, you get that extra pop of color where the sun is hitting the walls, and I just really love how it turned out. After I had those windows done, I went around to the opposite side of the castle to begin building the next tower. The bottom of this tower actually meets up with the walkway that wraps around the castle grounds. I made sure to cut open an entryway to allow access through the tower. This tower was easier to finish as I already had the other tower to go off of. I didn't make it the exact same though. I wanted them both to have their place in their own kind of style, so I did make sure that the actual details differed, but they both upheld that same architectural language. And finally, it was time to build up the largest tower of the entire castle. That's right, this diagonal build over here behind everything we've built so far is going to rise up high above everything else. So I went ahead and I got to work, of course adding different styles of stained glass windows rising up this tower. And for this tower, the main feature that I wanted to include was this open balcony kind of at the level of the top of the roof surrounding the entire tower. I actually built this tower up pretty quickly because I already had a good understanding of how I wanted it to look from constructing the previous towers. That didn't mean, of course, that I got it right the first time. I continued to make changes to this until I got it exactly how I wanted it to look. I was having a little bit of trouble with that open balcony, and I experimented using different styles of columns with dark oak fences and sandstone walls, before eventually deciding on just using sandstone walls. And I also initially had the stained glass windows at the top of this tower much bigger than the ones I ended up with. I really didn't want to overdo the stained glass, so I eventually came back in to make the walls surrounding the windows flesh out the top of the tower just a little bit more. And the design I finished off with is definitely my favorite. I'm loving how the tower is looking. Now that I had all of the main exterior features done with the castle, I took a step back and I came over to the side courtyard to make some changes. I felt like this courtyard was just way too small, and it didn't offer enough space for the things that I eventually wanted to add here. So, using World Edit, I cut open the walls and I copy and pasted them further out to make this courtyard larger. I manually came in and fixed up the castle walls, and with this extra space that I now had, I actually added another doorway into this large castle tower bordering the courtyard, along with an extra stairway allowing access to the top of the walls. Alright, we've spent enough time on the outside, it's time to head into our empty castle and begin working on the interior. The first thing that I did was cut open the wall, dividing both castle halls to make a larger space for me to work with. And then I built up these raised walkways bordering the interior walls. I spent some time fixing up the more minute details of the interior to make everything look a bit more cleaner and polished. And then I lit up the area, using some lanterns hanging from chains and sandstone walls, as well as this really simple design that I came up with, using pearlescent frog lights and oak wood trapdoors. Of course, every castle needs a carpet, so I designed one spanning across the hall using a mixture of colored wool, carpets, and even some glazed terracotta to enhance the details. I later swap out this purple wool for some red wool and some red terracotta to border the edges, and then I filled in the center using some checkered green and yellow wool, along with some more glazed terracotta blocks. I was dealing with a pretty large space, so to make sure that everything was lit up enough, I hid those frog lights under some carpet blocks. And then, between the castle halls where the floor changes heights, I added this nice segmented archway and some slabs leading up to the next hall. I spent some time getting this archway to look exactly how I wanted it to, which included extending those balcony walkways above it, and with the archway done, I spent some time fixing the carpet up a little bit leading into the next castle hall. And on the ground floor, I added a staircase wrapping around the wall, providing access to both the balcony outside as well as all of the towers in the room. Of course, every castle needs a throne, so I built one using some dark oak wood and red carpet blocks. I also added some new stained glass windows in the wall opening up to the exterior balcony to let some more natural light pour into the room. And with all of that in place, I continued to flesh out the interior details with some more azalea flower pots and trimmed armor stands that I had designed just for this castle. I really like this design using upside down stair blocks and armor stands so they look like they're standing on some kind of pedestal within those archways embedded into the wall. I also added an enchantment area complete with, of course, an enchantment table, some bookshelves, and lecterns. And I continued to embellish pretty much every nook and cranny that I could reach with some more details to make this castle feel truly alive. Here I also expanded the arch from the bottom floor to meet all the way up to the ceiling, and I placed some stained glass windows into them as well. And now we're back outside, this time to decorate the balcony space. I laid out some scaffolding to act as tables, with some chairs for people to sit and maybe enjoy a meal, as well as some more of those azalea flower pots around the walls of the balcony. But that's enough sunlight, we've touched enough grass. Or moss, I guess. Let's go back inside. I continued to flesh out all of the towers of the castle with some interior decorations. These start to get a little repetitive, and I want to leave some sort of surprise in this castle for you. So I'll just show you guys the stuff I added to the largest tower. I built a spiral staircase in the middle that would ascend to the upper floors of the tower, and then I kept on adding more things like flower pots, bookshelves, tables, and armor stands. And on the next floor up of the tower, I added even more tables and some shelves embedded into the wall, featuring more azalea pots and armor stands. And finally, on one of these upper floors, I added this really tall bookcase with ladders and some scaffolding allowing access to the higher bookshelves. And with that, the interior decorations were done. Sometimes I just don't know when to stop building a project. As you probably remember from earlier, this is supposed to be the main grand entrance to the castle, but comparing it to the other entrance that now had a courtyard, it didn't feel so grand. So my solution was to add an entire new section of the castle on this side of the river. So I got to work and I extended some walls and walkways from the two towers we had before. I built them up using the same moss and stone foundation, and I also extended the tough path through this new area. I built up two new towers on either side of the walls, complete with some sloped roofs, and I connected them together with a walkway over the new entrance, allowing for access over the wall and of course through this new main gateway. I also made sure to leave some space for another arched gateway over on the right side, as well as another third tower bordering it. This side entrance is meant to provide access across the river to the other castle courtyard and entrance. But in order to get across that river, I would need to build a bridge. Seeing as this was a last-minute installation to the castle grounds, I figured it would be nice to kind of incorporate that into the canon of this project and make that apparent with the bridge's design. Unlike the stone bridge heading straight into the grand entrance, I built this one entirely out of dark oak wood. I'll actually come back and add a deep slate roof over it, but first I built up yet again another tower on the other side of the river. I connected this entirely new tower with another walkway, creating another arched gateway on this end of our new bridge. And I really love how this new tower and everything else I just built came out. I managed to do it pretty quickly. I had gotten into kind of a flow state and I was worried that this would take forever and I wouldn't know when to stop, but I really do think it came out perfectly. And we're almost near the end of this project, so it was time to start connecting this new build to the other areas in my world with some roads. Flying over to the Hobbit village of Ashira, I spent some time using World Edit to flatten out the ground and give myself some more manageable space to work with. And then I made a pretty drastic change by entirely deleting this diagonal bridge and replacing it with a new one. I did this so that when you're exiting the village, the bridge would connect to the pathway towards the castle a bit more naturally. And again, I built that pathway using the same tough and mossy cobblestone design from earlier, and I made sure to blend in this new roadway with the old and different colored one that I have at the village of Ashira. And with the bridge in place, I extended the path coming out of it to reach all the way out across this giant field to the main entrance of our castle. And the next thing that I wanted to do was absolutely cover all of this land surrounding the castle with some custom trees. First, I used World Edit to fix the terrain surrounding the castle a little bit to provide a better composition and allow for a cleaner view of those balconies that I had worked so hard on. And with that done, I started designing different sizes of some custom trees using dark oak wood, fences, and leaves. And then I copy and pasted those around pretty much everywhere. This took a pretty long time. I wanted these trees to border a long clearing and allowing for a nice clear view of the castle, while making sure that this forest felt as natural as possible. So I worked on this for a few hours, and taking a step back, I did like how the area was looking, but all the trees kind of blended into this one color since I only used dark oak leaves. So to counteract that, I built up a new design using some oak wood and oak leaves to add some variety and contrast to the forest. I think this turned out great. The oak trees really add that splash of brightness that I wanted, and to complete the natural area, I used some custom brushes with World Edit to fill out the ground with some grass and different flowers. And with that done, I wanted to make the road feel a bit more alive and well-traveled, so I built up some carts and carriages, filled with barrels, blocks of hay, and other items, all being driven by horses towards the castle. And finally, adding some finishing details to the castle, I topped our new wooden bridge off with a deep slate roof, like I said I would. This bridge is built diagonally, and it changes elevation as well, but I actually managed to get the roof worked out fairly quickly, and this definitely makes the bridge fit in a lot better with the overall build. This is also the moment I decided to redesign one of the first towers we had built. I added a sloped roof to this tower, and I didn't know if I would prefer it to what I had before, but I did end up loving it, so I kept the new design. And with that in place, I re-entered the courtyard one final time to add a sort of smithing area where you can find some armor, weapons, and tools. Additionally, I added some more carriages inside the courtyard as well as outside of it. And with all of these new horses, I thought it wouldn't be right not to add a place to hitch your ride, so I added a small stable for horses just outside the castle walls. And with that, our project is complete. As we fly out of the village of Ashira, over this bridge and down the road, we can see our finished castle on the horizon coming into view. And it looks so sick. I love how this project came out and I'm really proud of this build. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching this time lapse. All of my YouTube members and Patreon supporters get exclusive access to all of my world downloads, including this one. So consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below, or support me on Patreon with the link in the description to get access to all of my world downloads. Thank you so much to all of my current YouTube members and Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate your support so much. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more Minecraft content just like this in the future. Also, comment down below what you thought about this build. If you have any ideas for future builds, projects, or tutorials, let me know down below. I do read all of your comments and I try to respond to everyone, and I appreciate any engagement that I can get from all of you. So even if you don't have any ideas, just say hey down below in the comments. This is a longer time lapse than I usually do, as this castle is a project that I've been passionately working on for quite a while. So once again, thank you all so much for watching this build and engaging with this video. I've been Light, and I'll see all of you in the next video very soon.